Something happened at TPC Deere Run this week that the PGA Tour did not want you to see. If you love golf, if you have ever cared about who wins on Sunday, you need to stop whatever you are doing right now and watch this till the very end, because what I am about to tell you changes everything you thought you knew about the PGA Tour's biggest problem. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, welcome, and if you are already part of this channel, you already know what time it is. Hit that subscribe button right now, not later, not after the video, right now, because I put my heart into digging up stories like this one, stories that the big golf networks will not tell you, stories that show you the real cracks forming inside professional golf. Every subscribe, every like, it tells me you want more of this, it tells me to keep going, keep digging, keep bringing you the truth before anyone else does. So tap that button, turn on notifications, and let's get into this, because trust me, by the time this video is over, you are going to see the PGA Tour in a completely different light. Okay. Let's talk about the John Deere Classic. For most casual fans, this tournament flies under the radar every single year. It is not a signature event. It does not have the massive purse of the Players' Championship. It does not have Scottie, Scheffler or Rory walking the fairways most years. But every single summer, right around the 4th of July, this event at TPC Deere Run in Silvis, Illinois becomes something much bigger than a regular tour stop. It becomes a mirror. A mirror that reflects exactly how healthy or how broken the PGA Tour really is behind the scenes. And this year, that mirror is showing something ugly. Because in the space of just a few days, the PGA Tour has watched a wave of players pull out of this event, one after another, and the timing could not be worse. This is the 55th edition of the John Deere Classic. It falls on the 4th of July holiday weekend, a week when the tour desperately needs storylines, needs star power, needs eyeballs on television. Instead, what fans are getting is a rotating door of withdrawals, injuries, and unexplained exits that have left tournament officials scrambling to reshuffle the field not once, not twice, but multiple times in a matter of days. Let's start from the top, because the story does not begin with the withdrawals. It begins with who was never even supposed to be there in the first place. World number 1 Scottie Scheffler is not in this field. Coming off a heartbreaking playoff loss at the Travelers' Championship, where he lost to Viktor Hovland in extra holes, Scheffler chose to sit this week out entirely, using the time to recharge before the season's final major, the Open Championship, which is now just over 2 weeks away. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a normal decision. Top players skip smaller events all the time to rest before majors. But when you are the PGA Tour, and your biggest draw, the face of the entire product, decides to skip your 4th of July event, that is a signal. That is a signal that this tournament, no matter how historic, no matter how respected among the players, simply does not carry the weight it used to in the eyes of the sport's biggest stars. And Scheffler was not alone. Viktor Hovland, fresh off his first PGA Tour victory of the season at the Travelers, is also skipping the John Deere Classic. Hovland has barely ever played this event, just one appearance back in 2019 where he finished tied for 16th. After an inconsistent season littered with missed cuts, he is instead choosing to prepare quietly for the Open Championship. Then there is Rory, the Masters champion, the man who finally completed the career Grand Slam this year. McIlroy is nowhere near TPC Deere Run either. 3 of the biggest names in the entire sport, absent, from an event that is supposed to be a showcase during one of America's biggest holiday weekends. But here is where the story turns from disappointing to genuinely alarming for the PGA Tour. Because it is not just about who chose not to show up. It is about who did show up, committed to playing, and then pulled out at the very last minute, leaving tournament organizers in a state of chaos just hours before the opening tee times. Let's talk about the eve of the tournament. On the night before the first round, the PGA Tour was forced to confirm that 3 players had withdrawn from the John Deere Classic all at once. 4-time PGA Tour winner John Vegas, 3-time PGA Tour winner Nico Echevarria, and Taylor Montgomery. All 3 gone, in the span of a single evening, right before the tournament was set to begin. And here is the part that should really make you sit up and pay attention. The PGA Tour confirmed all 3 exits were for undisclosed reasons. Undisclosed. No injury reports. No official statements explaining why 3 established winners on the PGA Tour suddenly decided to walk away from a tournament they were fully committed to play, at the very last possible moment. Think about that for a second. These are not rookies. These are not fringe players trying to sneak into a field. John Vegas has 4 PGA Tour titles to his name. Nico Echevarria has 3. These are proven winners, players with status, players who do not typically bail on a start without a very real reason. And yet, the reasons were never disclosed. When professional athletes at this level suddenly disappear from an event without explanation, fans deserve to ask questions, and honestly, so should the PGA Tour itself. Because of these 3 sudden late withdrawals, the tournament was forced into last-minute scrambling. Three-time PGA Tour winner Cameron Champ was called up to replace Echevarria. Will Gordon stepped in for Vegas. Noah Goodwin took Montgomery's spot. The good news for the tour is that the field still managed to reach its full 144 players. But the optics, the story that this tells to fans watching from home, is one of instability. One night, 3 unexplained exits, and a scramble to fill the gaps just to keep the tournament looking normal on paper. And that was just the beginning. Because just hours before the very first tee time of the tournament, world number 85 Patrick Rodgers pulled out of the John Deere Classic. Rodgers has history at this event. Back when Bryson DeChambeau won this tournament at 18 under par, Rodgers finished just a single stroke behind him, in serious contention for the title. This is a player who has genuinely competed at the top of this leaderboard before. And now, in 2026, hours before his own first-round tee time, he was gone. Replaced by Austin Cook, who was slotted in to tee off from the 10th hole alongside Dylan Wu and Takumi Kanaya. A withdrawal hours before your tee time is not something that happens because a player simply changes his mind. That kind of last-second exit almost always points to something physical, something serious enough that the player and his team decided it was not worth the risk of teeing it up. But once again, fans were left without a clear picture of exactly what forced Rodgers out at the very last moment. And then, as if the tournament had not already seen enough chaos before a single shot was struck in anger, the withdrawals continued once play actually got underway. Ireland's Seamus Power, a 2-time PGA Tour winner, started his opening round with real promise. 2 birdies on his front 9, playing solid golf, looking like a player who could make a real run at this title. But then everything unraveled. Bogeys at the 10th and the 11th. And then, brutally, 3 consecutive double bogeys starting from the 15th hole. Power appeared to be struggling physically as his round completely fell apart, eventually signing for a 6 over par 77. Shortly after finishing that miserable round, the 39-year-old informed PGA Tour officials that he was withdrawing, aggravating a back injury that has plagued him for years. This is not a news story for Seamus Power. His recent struggles trace back to persistent hip problems that first surfaced back in late 2023, problems that spiraled into a series of mid-back muscle injuries throughout 2024 and into 2025, forcing him out of multiple events despite scans that never showed any major structural damage. This is a player who once reached a career-high world ranking of 28 in the world, a 2-time PGA Tour winner with victories at the Barbasol Championship and the Butterfield Bermuda Championship. A player who looked like he was building a genuine Ryder Cup case after that Bermuda win. And now, ranked 198th in the world, and expected to fall outside the top 200 after this latest withdrawal, his season has produced just 2 top 20 finishes across 14 PGA Tour starts, with 0 appearances in any of this year's 4 major championships. So let's step back and actually count what has happened here. Jeanette in Vegas, gone, undisclosed reasons, the night before the tournament. Nico Echevarria, gone, same night, same lack of explanation. Taylor Montgomery, gone, same story. Patrick Rodgers, withdrawn hours before his tee time. Seamus Power, forced out mid-tournament with a serious back injury that has haunted his entire career. And layered on top of every single one of those withdrawals, you have 3 of the biggest superstars in the entire sport, Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Viktor Hovland, choosing not to even commit to this event in the first place. That is 6 major absences surrounding a single PGA Tour event within the span of one single week. Some by choice, some forced by injury, some completely unexplained. And when you put all 6 of those names together, when you actually line up how many recognizable, accomplished players are missing from this tournament for one reason or another, you start to understand why so many fans and insiders are calling this one of the shakiest weeks the PGA Tour has had in recent memory. Now I want you to think about why this actually matters, because on the surface you might be thinking, players withdraw from tournaments all the time, this happens every single season, why is this such a big deal? And you would be right, individually. Any one of these withdrawals on its own would be a minor story, a single line in a golf recap article. But when you stack them together like this, all within the same tournament week, it paints a very different picture. It raises real questions about player health, about scheduling fatigue on the PGA Tour calendar, about whether players are being pushed through too many consecutive weeks of competition without adequate recovery time, and about whether the biggest stars in the sport are quietly signaling that certain historic events on the calendar are becoming less and less of a priority to them. Remember, this tournament happens every single year right around the 4th of July, squeezed in the middle of a stretch that leads directly into the Open Championship. Players are essentially being asked to compete at a high level, travel, and then immediately turn around and prepare for one of the 4 biggest events of their entire year. It is a brutal stretch of the calendar, and this year, the cracks are showing in the most public way possible. And here is something else worth mentioning, because it adds even more weight to this story. Just this week, PGA Tour fan favorite Jordan Spieth, a 2-time John Deere Classic champion himself, someone who has a deep personal connection to this very tournament, publicly outlined an issue in golf that he said needs to be tackled soon. When one of the sport's most respected and well-liked players is speaking out about problems within the game during the exact same week that half the field seems to be falling apart around him, that is not a coincidence you can just ignore. So where does this leave the PGA Tour heading into the back half of this tournament? Well, despite every single one of these withdrawals, the show still had to go on. Brian Campbell, last year's champion, returned to TPC Deere Run attempting to become the first player since Steve Stricker to successfully defend a John Deere Classic title. The tournament still features recognizable names fighting for redemption and status, including Jordan Spieth himself, Ricky Fowler, Keegan Bradley, Daniel Berger, Tom Kim, and Tony Finau. There is also a genuinely exciting storyline brewing among the sport's next generation, with rising stars like Luke Clanton, Blades Brown, and the highly anticipated professional debut of 2-time Haskins Award winner Jackson Koiven, fresh off an impressive tied for 23rd finish at the US Open, all fighting to make a name for themselves at TPC Deere Run this week. But make no mistake, no matter how compelling those storylines are, they cannot erase the headline that has followed this tournament since the moment the withdrawals started piling up. Because when fans go searching for this event online, when they check the news, what they are finding is not stories about Jackson Koiven's exciting debut. What they are finding are headlines about chaos, about confusion, about unexplained late-night withdrawals and stars pulling out hours before their tee times. And for a PGA Tour that is already fighting battles on multiple fronts, battles against LIV golf, battles over fan engagement, battles over keeping its biggest stars committed to a demanding schedule, this is exactly the kind of story that adds fuel to a growing narrative that something is not quite right behind the scenes.